Hello, and welcome to our Personal Impact Workshop, which is a collaboration between the DE&S Social Mobility Network and the Cross-Government Socio-Economic Diversity Network. My name's Meryl Elias. I'm a Learning and Development Specialist for Defence Equipment and Support, DE&S for short. I co-designed this workshop with Jerry Clement, MBE, who may be joining us today. In the meantime, as my colleague from the DE&S Social Mobility Network, Rachel Crease, is here with us too. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Rachel Crease and I'm one of the co-chairs of the DE&S Social Mobility Network. I hope that you find this workshop useful and that you gain something from your attendance. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. Just so you know that there will be some discussion between us during the recording, really to prompt some thoughts in your mind, much like a live participation session would be, but it also saves me talking to myself. I am aware that on Teams, the shared slides can appear quite small, but don't worry, you have a PDF copy of the slide pack with you, and you may find that helpful to open in a separate window or access some of the links which you might want to look at during the session. So the objective of this workshop is to help you enhance your personal impact and increase your confidence in the workplace. Just going to move to the next slide to show you what we're going to cover today. So we're going to cover our internal barriers, such as imposter syndrome. We're going to have a look at why it's important to increase your profile. A top tip, be your own PR. So that's all about marketing yourself. Building credibility, how to do that. Why it's important to tell your story. Another top tip, breathe. I'll go through that with you practically later on. We'll have a look at how you can look at your strengths, knowing what they are and what areas you might need to work on. We'll have a look at what we call the aptitude versus attitude tool. And I'll be saying about how important it is to be your authentic self, not pretending to be something you're not. And we'll end with a few final thoughts and credits. So there is a natural break about halfway through the session, but also please feel free to pause the recording at any time to reflect. You may want to reflect on what we're actually talking about or do one of the activities, or just to take a break in your own time. This is your session. We want you to get plenty out of it. So take it at your own pace, relax and enjoy it. So we're going to look first of all at our internal barriers, such as imposter syndrome. You may or may not feel that you suffer with imposter syndrome. A lot of us do suffer with imposter syndrome, myself included. Some of the things on this slide you may feel applies to you. You may relate to. So sometimes you might feel that you don't quite fit into your team or the organization. You might lack confidence. Do you sometimes hold back from speaking in conversations and meetings because you're afraid of how you might come across, that you're not good enough? So does some of these statements feel familiar to you? You might want to have a think about that. Sometimes you might feel like we're never going to reach the top of the tree or even just reach the next branch of the tree, or get up that mountain, that huge mountain behind me. That's all very normal. A lot of us do feel like that. But without a doubt, our internal barriers, such as imposter syndrome, can really impede us in reaching our best. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. But what I'd like you to think about is actually why do we think this way? Is it just a lack of confidence? Or did something happen in the past which triggered these thoughts in your mind? When you think about it, imposter syndrome is a form of anxiety. And like any anxiety, it can be a huge barrier to us, an unhelpful thinking style. But the good news is we can choose to think differently. So keep in mind that often we change our behaviour due to this anxiety, and we actually end up concealing the real us. And that can actually be pretty stressful at times. If you think about that, wouldn't it be better to be actually more genuine, far less stressful and more productive? And we all have a talent that we can share. And you may not even know what that talent is at this point, but we do all have a talent that we can share, and we all have an impact that we can make. So imagine the improvement that we can make if we fuel our thoughts, which may be filled with anxiety, instead with things like perception, affinity, and esteem. Fill that funnel with those things. So perception is understanding that the way that we interpret another's thoughts may not actually be correct. Do you actually have evidence that what you're thinking that somebody else is thinking is actually the case? It's important to step aside from this thought. Don't step back, because that you're not going backwards. Step aside from that thought and just think about whether you actually do have that evidence that that is the way that that person sees you. It's all about perception, and it's probably not the case. Next is affinity, which is finding out through telling our story and being open and genuine. We find that while we all have our differences, we're actually all very similar after all. And you can take comfort in that. And lastly, esteem, which is respect and admiration, which is built by knowing our individual struggles, can actually be used to support others. And at that point, we can start to accept who we are. And this recipe may help us all create a positive environment where we feel we are good enough. We do fit in. We can be true to ourselves. We can be us, the real us. And this acceptance of self has to be one of the greatest success stories we can all share when moving away from the impacts of imposter syndrome and anxiety and maybe other shadows that come from our past. Moving on to the next slide. It's true that we don't always get what we want straight away. And people may not always respond in the way that we would like. We can't control that. However, we can help to shape that. Behaviour breeds behaviour. If we act in an assertive way, people tend to react in a constructive manner. And assertive behaviour can be learnt. Even if you think that you can't be assertive, you can actually learn assertive behaviour. It is possible. So on the screen now are some of the benefits of considering your personal barriers. and investing some time in developing your profile. I'll leave you to read that for a moment. So, why is it important to increase your profile? So your profile is basically what people say about you when you're not in the room. We all wonder what people say about us when we're not in the room. And we might be a little bit unkind to ourselves when we think about that. But again, we don't know that what we think people are thinking about us is actually correct. So actually, it's more important to be open in the first place. But by limiting ourselves and being underconfident may actually sway other people's views of us, and they don't actually see everything that you do have to offer. So being open and sharing your opinions and your views, being respectful towards others and their views, because it's very likely that somebody else may not have the same opinion or view as you do, but they're all important. That's really important to do that. And be positive and constructive with your views. Don't be afraid of using the word I in what you're, I think, I believe. And make sure other people know that you're describing those things as opinions and not saying I am right. This is the only way, which some people do. But if you're clear in yourself as to what you need, and if you're honest, true to yourself, then that will shine through and people will take account of that. And they may even question their own views because you may have mentioned something that they might not have thought about. So do remember that behaviour breeds behaviour. It really does. If you're negative and you don't want to share your views, people won't open to you. You won't be making that impact that you could be making. So maybe a little bit of reflection. What's your current profile? Where do you think you stand right now? Are you happy with that? Are you happy with what you think your profile is? Where do you want to be? How can you get there? Having a look at that image, how many of us have done this at some point? Have buried our heads in the sand for fear of not coming across in the right way or being less important or efficient, or your ideas just not being good enough for the environment that you're in. Is that really going to get you noticed? So take some time to reflect on that if you like. Pause the video, have a little reflection time. Think about that. Write it down. Write it down now. And then start working on a few things. Some of the things that we describe. And then have another look at it in a few weeks or months' time and see how far you've got. I think you might be surprised. Yeah, so just a little added interesting fact there, in case you actually think that ostriches do actually bury their heads in the sand. They don't bury their heads in the sand. They actually stick their heads in the sand to get to their eggs, to rotate them, which keeps them warm. So it's actually a lot more positive than people may think. Fascinating fact. Any observations from Rachel on this slide? Any experiences or questions on this, Rachel? I've put you on the spot now.
No, Meryl.
Did you know about the ostrich thing?
Actually, I didn't until I had I'd done this workshop myself. So that was a new one on me. But you know what? I think we spend a lot of time worrying about what we think other people may think about us, and actually most of the times it's things that we have put on ourselves. It's not actually what people think at all. So people think that we're effective, efficient, professional, and we might be thinking that they think that we are slow and unprofessional and inefficient. And I think sometimes we just need to be a little bit easier on ourselves and stop beating ourselves up and stop being so negative about how we view ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's exactly sort of like the point about, you know, have you got that evidence? Has anybody actually said to you, I think you're really inefficient. I don't think your views matter at all. I think that, you know, you're not really good enough to be in this team. You've got nothing to offer. Has anybody actually said that to you? I bet they haven't. So sometimes it's actually just like overcoming that obstacle of actually speaking for the first time, and everybody goes, whoo, Meryl's speaking. I don't have that problem, but I used to. I have had in some cases, but usually it's me opening my mouth and then regretting it afterwards. So you could like get a little bit of a happy medium there. But it is important to be open with your views and your opinions, because it might just be that piece of the puzzle that others are finding it hard to find. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so moving on then to the first top tip that I have for you today. These on the screen now are some of the ways that you can start to market yourself. So we've just talked about profilers. The best way to find out what your profile actually is, instead of wondering about it, ask people. Say, how do I come across? Do I come across as confident? Do you think I've got anything to offer? You know, actually come out with it. It's very unlikely that people will be rude to you as a result. It's worth doing, because what other people see, you know, is possibly different from what you see. And if you find that it's not actually, that isn't actually true about yourself, then you need to actually take action to change their view. Know your strengths, and there is a little tool that I will share with you later on, so that you can actually really go into detail about strengths, which are the success profile strengths that we're going to have a look at later. And it's worth doing in your own time to go through that, because there are some strengths in there that you may not have even thought of, and actually you have. It's a very comprehensive list and worth looking at. Also, if you've got the chance to find a project within your work area that you can actually take responsibility for and call your own, so that you really have a chance to shine, something that you're really very interested in. And don't be afraid to announce when you've actually done something that you're proud of, or something that you've achieved. Tell people about it. People are so busy with their own lives and work and other things going on that they're not necessarily going to notice everything. And so if you announce what you've achieved, whether that be to your manager, or in a forum, or in a newsletter, or however, you know, or just to colleagues, or in a document or a CV, then that can make a real difference. We all find it a little bit difficult to big ourselves up, but that's the only way to actually, you know, to announce those accomplishments is the only way to actually make sure that we are noticed. Excuse me. And then on the right hand side, one of my top tips is to keep what I call a star chart, which I will go into a little bit later on with you. So don't worry too much about that now, but that can make a real difference. Another option is to get a sponsor. And a sponsor is actually a little bit different from a mentor, because a mentor, we've all heard of mentoring, and a mentor will support you and help guide you through to achieve certain things and give you recommendations in that way. But a sponsor goes that one step further than a mentor and is willing to actually represent you or back you up or recommend you in a situation where you might be looking for promotion or a tile opportunity or just to actually do a particular job. And a sponsor is somebody who will actually reinforce the fact that you are the best person for that particular role. But you can't go in and just ask for a sponsor without that person knowing you. You do have to build a relationship with that person over a period of time. So it does take some effort from you to prove yourself to that person so that they are then willing to recommend you to others. And then the other important one, and I've fallen foul of this one in the past, is have a purpose. Don't try and be everything to everybody, because you will spread yourself too thinly and people won't recognize you particularly for the most important thing. If you concentrate on your passions and stick to that, it's a little bit like starting your own business and having a USP, a unique selling point. And I'm speaking from experience because I was self-employed for a couple of years and I was trying to do too many things. I was trying to be everything that people might want. And it was just splattergunning. It's what they call splattergunning. I would have been better concentrating on one thing that I was really passionate about and really good at and just sticking to that and becoming known for that. So bear that in mind. Don't necessarily be a jack of all trades. It's good to be flexible and willing to take on anything. It's good to turn your hand to anything and show that willingness. But when you're actually looking for an area to make your impact, try and concentrate on one thing or one or two things, and you'll get much further that way. And lastly, probably the most important thing is to actually believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, no one else will believe in you. So I'm going to show you a startup chart on the next slide. And we'll go through what that means. Okay. So a star chart, we might be thinking of when we were little and we had the gold stars that we used to sort of like stick on a chart, and then maybe when we got a few stars, we had a reward. This isn't quite the same as that, but even so, it is actually a record of your achievements. So this is just an example. I don't expect you to read the small text which will come up on the slide in a moment, because you won't be able to, it's microscopic. But you will be sent, you have been sent a copy of the slides, and you should be able to zoom in and see it in more detail. It's actually an extract from my star chart. So it is a real case scenario. Don't mind sharing it with you. It is real. So it just gives you a bit of an example of how you might be able to write something. So we've got headings at the top, which relate to the main areas, which is situation, task, action, result. And then we've got actually what you've done underneath that. So you can create a table which looks a little bit like this, with those headings which apply to everything that you want to record. So the first S is STAR. In STAR is situation. So basically, the situation is what you were faced with in the first place. So when you come to do a task, what the situation was which resulted in the task needing to be done. So you know, it could be you know, low numbers in attendance for something, for instance, you know, something that needs addressing, basically. So what the situation was before you started doing anything, why you were given that task. Then the T is for task. So what it is that you had to do. So it would be basically putting right whatever it was that was in the situation. So that wouldn't be necessarily a very long piece of narrative in that column. So what it was that you were tasked with. The A is action, which is basically how you went about that task. So in this bit, this is actually really, really important. Make sure that you use I in this part. I did this, I did this. Even if it was a team effort, pick out the things that you actually did, because that's where you're going to make that impact. So how you went about undertaking this task and rectifying the issue that was in the situation. And make sure that you use words that relate to the type of behaviours and technical competencies that are needed within the civil service success profiles. So pick out those key words. Over on the left-hand side, you will see behaviour and tech comps column, which is where you can actually then identify the behaviour, the success profile, behaviour or technical competency or skill that it most relates to. And it could well be more than one of those. That's really important to keep in your star chart, because if you go for interviews, especially with the civil service, generally, whether it's internal or external, they're likely to be testing you on some of these behaviours and technical competencies. So you need to make sure that you're flagging up what you've done is a really good example of how you comply and work within these behaviours and competencies. And then the R is result. And this is like really, really key. This is what they want to see. So when people are interviewing you, they want to hear that what you've done has made a difference to the business in some way or another. So be very clear about the impact that what you've done has had. It could be data, or it could be feedback, you know, from feedback that people have given you, endorsement that people have given you, when you've been monitoring and evaluating the situation afterwards, how it's actually made a difference. But do record that result. It ties it up and shows that actually what you do makes a real difference. And if you get into the habit of doing this for everything that you've achieved, all the sort of key things that you've achieved that you feel are worthy of noting, and they might be actually, when I say key, they don't have to be big things, they can be quite small, but if they've made a difference and had a positive result, then it's definitely worth recording. And if you get into the habit of doing this as you go, Start doing it now. Just start recording it as you do it. Then it's a few minutes of your time. You can then forget about it if you want, because I think half the issue when we're sort of in a pressurized situation and we're asked to give an example of something that demonstrates a particular behaviour or technical competency, and we sort of go blank in like a stressed situation. It's like, I'm sure I've done something. I'm sure I just can't think. I can't think straight. Yeah, I'm sure I've done something, but you can't quite put your finger on it. But if you've actually got this in front of you, many of our interviews now, of course, are virtual. And so it's easy to have this in front of you. And, nobody would question it if you need to refer to it. But I think even in the face-to-face situation, there's nothing wrong with having something in front of you to prompt you, because it's entirely normal to be nervous in that sort of situation. So nobody's going to blame you for referring to notes that you've got in front of you, written in front of you. But this can be useful for not only interviews, but things like CVs. You can write your CV in a more impactful way. Performance management conversations. We all have those, and we all have to actually report back on our objectives. And if we get into a habit of doing this, we can actually cut and paste stuff into objectives. We can actually use the same stuff and just keep repurposing it, which saves time. Or if all these situations aside, it can actually be really good as just a good old self pat on the back. So every time that we're thinking that we're not good enough, remind yourself by having a look at your start chart. Actually, I am. I do things which make a difference and make an impact. You can also record less favourable outcomes on a star chart if you wanted to, as long as they've resulted in a learning point. I wouldn't recommend putting less favourable things in there if you didn't learn anything from them. But you could actually include them and say, well, I learned this, it didn't quite work, but this is what I learned from it, and this is what I'd do differently next time. Because that's normal too, because none of us are perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, but the important thing is that we learn from them. Please feel free to jump in at any time, Rachel, if you want to.
Yeah, one point I would make with this actually is I have been in an interview before and answered my question, which I thought was perfectly fine. And then I was asked, and what would you do differently if you'd done it again? And because I thought I had a textbook answer and, it was absolutely fine and they would say, oh, that's great, I didn't really think about how I would have approached it differently. And I was almost put on the spot a bit and had to really think quickly, right, what would I have done? And so if this is something that people choose to use as CV evidence, perhaps, then they might want to consider, although they may have had a good result, they may have had a bad result, what would they have done differently? Given the opportunity to have that time again and be in that situation, how else might you have dealt with it? Because there may have been a better way. There may have been a way that may not have turned out successful, and it could be that the way that you've done it was successful, but had you have done it another way, it wouldn't have been. And, feel free to say that, because that shows that you've given consideration to what the scenario was. So, you may want to keep in your mind other ways that you could have dealt with that action area on it. Thanks, Meryl.
That's a really good point. Thank you very much, Rachel. And realistically, that does happen to us. How many of us get everything right first time? That's not the case. But we'll talk a little bit more about sort of like learning from mistakes and things later on as well, when we looking at the importance of our own story. So that is a very key point. So thank you very much for that, Rachel. So that's just to confirm that you need to match what you're doing to a behaviour or competency. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This is all about building credibility. So we've actually touched on this already. Starting from the top of the tree, that's a bit like a Christmas tree. People trust what they can see. When you're open and honest, others don't have to guess what your motives are. So that's being transparent, and we've spoken about the importance of that already. And it takes the stress away. You can be you, and people won't think that you have other motives if you're open and honest. And then moving down to expertise. The more expertise you have and can demonstrate, the greater your credibility. So it's important when you're working on things to actually know what it is that you're doing. Take the time to learn the things you need to learn to be able to do your job well. Be enthusiastic about what you do, and just keep up to date on things, the type of work that you're doing, because things change very rapidly. So people will actually have more belief in you if you can show that you can keep up with those changes, move with the times. They will come to you as an expert. And they'll trust your judgment, and they'll want you to do a job because they'll think that you are the best person to do it. So it is important. We all have to look at our CPD and keep our skills and knowledge up to date. But it is really very, very important to do that if you actually want to take that one step further. The next bit that we're going to talk about is about our character, and how that is really important to building credibility. Because character is actually, it's about you, it's about your core values and your authenticity. And if you don't have that, you don't have credibility. It's the foundation of everything else. So that's why we're going to look at how important your own story is, because that's what shapes you. So your story, why is it important? Who recognizes this game? Takes you back a little bit, doesn't it? Snakes and Ladders. I used to get to play this a lot. We played a lot of board games even when I was little, and this was one of them. And I like to sort of look at my story as being a bit like this, because none of us have a plain sailing story. I'd be very surprised if anybody had a plain sailing story. We all have peaks and troughs in our lives, things that happen that we're not expecting, some things which may throw us at the time, some obstacles in our way, down times, negative times, as well as some achievements and up times, hopefully, times when we're actually feeling really positive about ourselves. That is normal, real life situation. And so I often feel like my life has been a little bit like this. And when the negative things come along, they are a nuisance, absolutely. And at the time, it's really tough. I'm not going to lie. It is tough to sort of get through those times. But I try and look back on those times when things don't go to plan afterwards and think about what I've learned from them. It's what we were saying earlier on, you know, sort of like with work tasks. If you look back and or step aside, I like to say, rather than look back, because I like to look forward rather than back. So step aside from those times and think about, actually, what could I have done differently to prevent that? Or what have I learned from that? What have I learned about myself? What have I learned about other people? What have I learned about the situation generally? And more often than not, it's actually made me make different decisions in the future, which have then shaped me as a person. Sometimes those situations have led me in an unexpected direction, and I've ended up discovering new talents and passions as a result. One of the examples I can give you on this is that when I was at school, the job that I actually really wanted to do was a flight attendant, air cabin crew. I loved languages, I loved traveling, I love people, and I thought, how can I get into something that actually involves all of that? I even love flying. How weird is that? Many people will think, why? But love, got a bit of a thing about planes, love flying. So yeah, that was my thing. That's what I wanted to do. And I knew that I didn't need a degree to go and do that. What I needed was work experience. So against all the advice that I was given at school, that you've got your A levels, you could go and get a degree, blah, 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 I thought, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to get the work experience. I want to go and be a flight attendant. And so that's what I did. I got the work experience that I needed. I applied for various cabin crew jobs. I got offered a couple of cabin crew jobs, and I was basically on the verge of doing exactly what I wanted to do, which was great. But then my life sort of changed at that point. I met my husband at that point, and I sort of became a little bit more sort of orientated towards wanting to start a family. It wasn't going to work particularly if I was on long haul flights, away from home all the time. And I made a decision that I needed to compromise, and I needed to think again about what I was going to do, because that would have probably scuppered my relationship at that time. So I decided that I wasn't going to accept those jobs, and I started my family. I started doing a different job, more sort of finance orientated, admin orientated, and then after I'd had my first child, I decided to go back to work, but I wanted a school job, preferably, to fit in with the school holidays. So that's what I managed to get. I started working in the office in a school. I eventually became a school business manager, and it led me into the world of education and learning and development. And over the years, and I spent a lot of years in education, I discovered that I actually had a real passion for learning and development. And I really, really enjoyed helping people develop and reach their potential. And no matter what their background, because I had a working class background, I consider myself being from a lower socioeconomic background. And so I wanted to help others achieve, and I really started concentrating on that, and eventually went self-employed as an L&D consultant. Spoken briefly about that before. Was trying to do too much for it, too many things for too many people, and it didn't work out. And so I eventually applied for a job in learning and development with defence equipment and support, and here I am, in my element, loving it, loving developing a cohort of degree apprentices. I absolutely love my job, and this is what I want to do, and that's how I found my passion. This isn't what I was thinking I was going to do when I left school. Absolutely not. I was going to be air cabin crew or I was going to be an interpreter. I do have to interpret on occasions in my job now. Different type of interpreter though. Now that's just a little anecdote from me to give you an example, an honest example of one of the things that made an impact on me, and how something in my life, which I thought at the time, I got a compromise here. This isn't actually how I saw this going, but it was right for me. And, you know, I've learned from it. And that's the important thing. So it's important to remember that none of the snakes are wasted. Your story shapes you and your values. And it helps you to realize actually what's really important to you. At the time when I changed my mind, it was family and relationships. And it helped me to discover a talent that I didn't know I had. You learn from reflecting on your experiences, which influence your future decisions. And your journey develops your passions, and these are what will have an impact on your life and work. Interestingly, I'm an L&D specialist, learning and development, and one of the ways that I've actually developed my personal impact is by designing a personal impact workshop. How weird is that? And this quote here, I have prospered because of my background, not despite it, is actually a recent quote from somebody who works in the civil service. It's so simple, but it's so true. Loving it. Rachel, have you got anything else to add to this slide?
Yeah, there's a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And, you know, sometimes we do face some really difficult challenges in our personal lives, in our working lives, but, you know, God willing, we can come out the other side of that and learn from it and improve from it. And, you know, if it's a mistake that we make from work, we learn, and we probably wouldn't do that same mistake again. And so, you know, we have to brush off and move on. And we can't keep dwelling on things that may have happened in the past, because sometimes it prevents us from moving forward and from taking those ladders and take those opportunities. So when things come up, you know, we sometimes have a tendency to say, I can't do that. You'll see a job advert, it will have 10 different activities on there. And we look and we say, oh no, I can't do one of those 10. And it prevents us from maybe applying for something. And actually we should be saying, yes, I can do 9 of those things. I can do 8, I can do 7, even 5. Just go for it. You know, if we don't do these things, we don't know, and we don't want it to be a regret. So take that chance, take those opportunities, and develop your story, develop your journey. Thanks, Mella.
Well said, Rachel. Thank you. So maybe you might like to sort of take a little breather now and reflection time, and think about what your passions actually are. What are they now? Think about where they came from. What helped you develop those passions? And just keep in mind that it's about organic growth. It's about learning through your journey and time and where it takes you. Organic growth and zero waste. None of those snakes are wasted. And I'm wishing you plenty of ladders. Okay, so we've come to a natural break now in the session. As you can see, I'm saying see you in 5, but actually because this is a recording, you can take as long as you like. You can come back tomorrow if you like. But gonna let you take a little breather now, and we'll see you in a while. Hello and welcome back to our personal impact workshop. Hope you've had a nice break. We're going to wake you up a little bit now by moving around a little bit and doing some breathing exercises to give you some practical tips on how to project confidence in situations where you need to present yourself. So this is my top tip too, and quite simple really. Breathe. Breathing is a good thing. We breathe obviously all the time, day in, day out. We breathe, we don't even notice, you know, sort of like us doing it. It's usually day to day, it's usually quite sort of shallow breathing. It's because we don't really think about how we're doing it. And we tend to sort of associate breathing with a functional thing, basically. If we don't breathe, we don't live, which is true. But I'm going to teach you a method of breathing that actually has some really amazing physical and mental benefits, and can actually really help to compose yourself and energize yourself to be able to present yourself better. And I'd recommend using this breathing technique in any situation where you want to either de-stress, take some mindfulness time, whether you're going to speak like public speaking, presenting yourself in an interview, anything that makes you particularly nervous. Also, this really helps with physical exercise as well. With my other hat on, I teach dance, and I use this breathing technique with my dance students to help their muscles work better and then perform better. So it's really helpful in lots of different situations. It lowers your blood pressure. It slows your heart rate. It helps the blood pump around your body more effectively, oxygenates your muscles. You name it, it's got multiple benefits. And this is called diaphragmatic breathing, which the diaphragm is a muscle which sits just underneath your rib cage. From one side of your body to the other. It's actually quite a large muscle, and that is the muscle that actually controls your breathing. So you think of breathing actually it's your lungs that are doing it, but it's actually your diaphragm which is doing the work, and your lungs are the pockets, the bags that fill up with air, basically when you breathe. Okay, so the diaphragm is really, really important, and many of us don't actually sort of really realize it's there and don't necessarily engage it properly. So the difference between normal sort of shallow breathing and deep diaphragmatic breathing is that we breathe in slower and deeper and use our diaphragmatic muscle to actually contract and expand to help the whole breathing system actually work much better. Okay, so first of all, you can do this seated. I'm going to do it seated. You can also do it standing up. You can also do it lying down. So it's up to you, you know, how you want to approach this. You can even do this while you're driving the car. It's that simple. So first of all, you need to sort of like pull up as far as you can through the spine, so that you're sort of pulling up as if you imagine that a string is pulling you from the top of your head. So pull up it through the spine and lengthen the neck, nice and tall, as far as you can, but keep them relaxed. Now roll your shoulders back and then down, and then relax so that there you drop your shoulders. Okay, so it really does open up the chest. It lengthens the neck. Probably feel things creaking you know, especially if you've been sat in one position for a long time. Okay, and so it's a relaxed position, but it's pulled up. Okay, so it's really opening up the abdomen and the chest so that you can work that diaphragm muscle as much as you can. And then we breathe in slowly through our nose. I'm going to have to speak and do this at the same time, so it's a bit weird. But so breathe in slowly through the nose and imagine that you're blowing up a balloon, just sort of like underneath your rib cage. So actually let your abdomen expand like a balloon. I'm actually allowing you to do this. We spend all our lives trying to suck it in. Now I'm telling you to blow it out. So blow it out. Nobody's looking. So breathing in, expanding that balloon, that diaphragmatic muscle. And then breathing out slowly as well, but breathing through your lips like you're blowing out a candle. And again, so breathing in through the nose, blowing up that balloon, and breathing out through the mouth, like you're blowing out a candle. And then one more time, breathing in through the nose, and breathing out through the mouth. Well done, that's brilliant. So that is what diaphragmatic deep breathing is all about. Okay. So you can add a little bit to that, which will help you speak better and more clearly when you're presenting. So when you've done that breathing, if you breathe in and fill your cheeks up like your hamster, so breathing in the same way, fill your cheeks up like a hamster. This is so weird because I'm having to do this on camera. And then blow a raspberry. And then doing it again. This is such fun. Sorry about the sound effects. And again. Okay. I think I've sprayed everything around. So this is actually, I'm not making this up out of complete like strangeness. This is actually a power pose that has been taken from a TED talk by Amy Cuddy. I'll send you the link for that, or it's in your pack, the link, if you want to have a look at it. But it's a power pose and a preparation for speaking, public speaking. So it will help you to form your words better. I'm already feeling like I'm forming my words better. It's sort of cleared me out. It's energized me. Have a little go. Try and do it sort of like in your own time when maybe there's not anybody around, and then try and introduce yourself afterwards as you would be if you introduce yourself to an audience, and see what difference that actually makes. If you're standing up, you may want to incorporate sort of like a bit more of a power pose generally, maybe putting your hands on your hips, still looking relaxed though, don't tense, keep those shoulders relaxed and back, but putting your hands on your hips can actually project confidence, looks much better than putting your hands in your pockets, which is quite negative. Think about that posture in your neck and your back and your shoulders, because that's what will help you project. If you think about like if you're sitting in you're sitting in an interview and you're all like this and you're sort of like crunched up and you don't, it's not gonna project the confidence. So whether you're sitting down or standing up, try and think about that posture of the upper half of your body, think about that breathing, and think about that sort of projecting of that confidence, even if you're not confident. Okay, so I got particularly nervous about this presentation, this session, but by doing these exercises, it's helped to relax me. It makes me feel like more myself when I'm presenting, and then that comes across as being more confident to other people. So it's well recommended, and it's quite a simple thing. It might feel a bit daft if you're doing it and there are other people around, but hey ho, teach somebody else to do it as well. So I hope you have fun with that. You all right with that, Rachel? It's great fun. It's good when you sort of like you have an audience of people and they're not on camera and they're all doing this in the background and they're putting comments on the in the chat box about like what their cat is thinking of them or what their colleagues in the office, you know, they're all laughing at them. But it's it adds a bit of fun to the day as well, I think. And try that even when you're not presenting. Just try that for just a little bit of a mindfulness time. Think about that breathing. Don't let other thoughts come into your mind. If you think about what you're doing with the breathing and the parts of your body that you're using, and just concentrate on that, that's a form of mindfulness, which is really, really good for stress relief. Don't forget to smile. Okay. Thank you for participating in that. Okay, we're moving on to the next slide now. It's all about knowing your strengths. So there is a link, which is, you can see it on the screen right now. It is in your slide pack to the Civil Service Strengths Dictionary, which until I was introduced to it, I didn't even know existed. So it's worth having a look at. A lot of us know about the success profiles, and this is related to that, but it's actually specifically about strengths. It's a really, really helpful list because it prompts you to think about some of the things that you may not actually realize that you do particularly well. So have a look in your own time. Go into that link. You can have a look at it now if you want to, or do it afterwards, and just go through those strengths and highlight the ones that you feel that you have. Simple exercise. And there'll be ones that you think that maybe you don't have, which is fine. You may identify some of those as actually being necessary for the job that you want to do or that you do, and that you feel that you might need to work on. So it's a really simple way of actually identifying areas that you might want to work on to take your journey even further. And it's also a really good way of actually seeing how many strengths you do have and the amazing number of strengths that you will have. You will surprise yourself at the number of strengths that you actually have. So make sure that people know about those strengths, use those strengths, really make an effort to shine because of those strengths. They're amazing things that you've built up over time, and you should be showing them off. Rachel, when you had a look at that list, were there any observations or any surprises that you had when you looked at the strengths?
I think we take a lot of things for granted, actually, and we don't necessarily consider them to be strengths. And it's only when we see them listed down that we realise that we can tick things off. We tend to be quite negative about ourselves and don't see things as strengths. So I think we might surprise ourselves by looking at that and seeing that things actually are strengths.
Yes.
And you know, it could be that things are areas for development, and that's fine as well. Work on those and turn those areas of development into strengths.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. And you may want to sort of like go one step further with this exercise and do a SWOT analysis, which is, for those of you who may not know what that is, it's a quadrant that you can divide into strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you can sort of write some of those strengths in the strengths box. Think about the areas that you need to develop, and put that, it seems a shame to call it weaknesses because it's not that bad, it's just areas for development, but put that in the weaknesses box. The opportunities, those are internal things. The opportunities and threats are more external, so looking outside the box a little bit, away from yourself, and look at what opportunities might arise that you could take advantage of to both use your strengths and work on your areas for development, and also listing the threats of things that might get in the way. And you know, there will be threats, and sometimes you can't actually completely get rid of them, but you can help to mitigate them. So doing a SWOT analysis is a very useful tool in lots of different scenarios, but it can be used in this sort of more personal situation if you want to have a look at how you might be able to develop those areas that need addressing. And just keep reminding yourself of what your strengths are. You need to know your strengths. Okay, so I'll let you do that in your own time, and I hope that is of benefit to you. Moving on to another tool that we can use. Again, it's sort of related, really. How will I know what to work on? So you can use this tool in different ways. Aptitude means a natural ability to do something. So there are going to be things that you're drawn towards, and you do it well, basically. So that's what the aptitude side of it is. The attitude is your attitude towards progressing, developing your work, basically. So it's sort of like the more mental side of it, really, if that makes sense. So when you're looking to put things in these boxes on the quadrant, the type of things that you should be looking at are fairly sort of physical things in your job that you do or you might have to do. Really sort of like basic job tasks, really, like things like writing reports or chairing meetings or dealing with contractors or managing staff or communications, finance, using teams, giving feedback, interviewing, things like that, just like things that you actually do day to day in your job, and pop them into these boxes. So think about what you have an aptitude for, what you do well and you enjoy doing it. Put that in the top left hand box. Underneath that, what I do well, what you have an aptitude for but you don't particularly enjoy doing it. There are some of those things that come into, you know, sort of like, yes, I can do it well because I've learned to do it well, but I'd rather not be doing it, really. And then up in the top right hand box, what I don't do well, but I enjoy doing it. So that's an interesting one. You know, we might think about hobbies and things like that in that, but we're thinking in work terms here. So it could be that you actually enjoy chairing meetings because you like being with people, but you're actually really bad at keeping it on time and getting all the agenda items done, things like that. And then in the bottom right hand box, what I don't do well and I don't enjoy doing. So I think we all have a few of those in that we can put in that box. So have a think about that first before you do anything with it. And then the actual tool is designed for at least two things. The first is actually just basically getting to know yourself even more and then being aware of your strengths and what you do well, and also what you'd rather not be doing, or you think that you would actually like to be doing, but you'd need to develop that to get there. So because self-awareness creates power. The second thing is to assess maybe what you'd like to go for next, what role you might like to go for next, whether it's promotion or a different role, or like a sideways move or whatever it is. would you like to make that move because it's an area for your development and you want to develop that area, or is it to actually strengthen an existing strength and you want to become an expert in that field that you have a strength for? There's lots of different reasons of moving roles and taking opportunities, but this helps you to sort of work out whether you might have a cultural fit with the team that you're likely to be moving into, because looking at the type of work that they do and sort of like where your aptitude lies and where your passions lie, it will help you identify whether you actually might have that fit, because it's quite difficult to know otherwise whether you would actually fit into that team if you're not already working in that team. So I think a tool like this can actually help you to sort of make that muddy water a little bit clearer. Because when you're from a lower socioeconomic background, we tend to go for promotion because we think that it looks like a good job fit. But if the cultural fit isn't there, it can then have an adverse effect, because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy of not feeling good enough. And it's purely because it's not a cultural fit for you. It's nothing to do with you actually not being good enough. It's actually not the right fit. So it's a tricky one, but this can help you identify that. Rachel, have you got anything else to add to this slide?
Yeah, I think when I did this slide myself, in the box, what I don't do well and I don't enjoy doing it, finance was an area that I had in that particular box. And I think sometimes we need to realise that if we don't do something well and we don't enjoy doing it, pass it to the people that do it well and do enjoy doing it. So I will never claim to be an expert in financial matters. And so that's where I utilise my colleagues who do enjoy doing finance and do a good job in that area. So we're not expecting people to become experts in all fields. A lot of roles now do have a lot of crossover, so we wear many different hats. You know, we might be doing communications, we might be doing business case writing, we might be doing finance elements, we might be doing meetings, we might have staff management. Now, we are not expected to be experts in all of these areas and fully competent. And so, you know, utilize those around you to help you achieve the goals that you need to achieve as part of that role, because that's their specialist area. So it could be that we do want to develop in those areas so that we improve our knowledge and feel a little bit more confident. But it may be that actually we don't need to do that and we just utilize the tools and skill sets that we have around us.
Absolutely. That is a really good point, Rachel. And it is about teams. It is about not Microsoft Teams, but real teams. It is about utilizing the strengths of a team, and the best teams will make the most of all that diverse range of skills that they have in their team, and what you don't have, somebody else will, and vice versa. And that's why it's important to put it out there as to, you know, sort of what those skills are that you have, because if you don't know what you don't know, your manager or your colleagues won't know that you can do something unless you actually show them that you can and tell them that you can and know what your strengths are. And working, sort of like, you may not see things in exactly the same way as every one of your colleagues, but that's a good thing, because it means that there is actually a good mix of approaches and ideas and skills and strengths in the team. So it's actually, it can be a real positive. You can channel it in a really positive way rather than a negative way. So that's fantastic. So, we're hoping that these tools and suggestions that we're giving you will actually help to make a difference to you. Use them as you see fit. You don't have to use all of them. You might have other tools that you might want to try, but it is important to take that time and think about this and reflect on things, and this is what will actually sort of help you be more sort of clear and confident in your own mind, and some new sort of like habits that you might want to get into, like keeping a star chart, which shouldn't be an onerous task if you just add to it as you go along. With the star chart, you might actually want to start by using your CV as a basis. So you'll probably have a CV already with some achievements in there. So try translating that into a star chart so that you can sort of get a bit of a flow for it. So we move on to our penultimate slide now. So I just want to summarize what we've been through and covered in this session. So we've looked at imposter syndrome, recognise that it is a common form of anxiety, and as such, it's an unhelpful thinking style, which we can choose to step aside from and use our own struggles to support others. We've learnt some strategies and actions which can increase our levels of confidence, and some tips for public speaking, embarrassing as they may be. We've learnt the importance of your individual story or journey, and that there are bound to be snakes as well as ladders at times, but you will learn from those experiences, which will help you make better decisions in the future. And we've discovered that it is important to be authentic and celebrate our strengths and our passions. And this is how you will make that personal impact that you want to. So finally, then, before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to add, Rachel, to any other comments or observations before we go through the credits?
I'd just like to say that I hope that people have found this useful, and use these tools, even if you make a start to it, put it down and come back to it. These are things that we develop as time goes on. So even if you're just able to identify one point, that's fine. Don't beat yourself up about these things. This is something that we develop as we go on, and we improve our personal impact as we go through our careers. So that's it for me, Meryl. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. It's been lovely having you on the session today. So just like to end, really, just a few credits that I'd like to mention. I'd like to thank Jerry Clement, MBE. She wasn't able to make it to this session today. She is the founder of the Cross-Government Socioeconomic Diversity Network. She co-designed this session with me, so I'd like to thank her very much for inspiring me to put this session together and share it across government departments. There's also a couple of credits that I've used in the slides there. If you'd like to contact us in the DE&S Social Mobility Network, the multi-user email address is on that slide and on the screen. It would be lovely to hear from you. Rachel and I have enjoyed having your virtual company today. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to map your story, work out what your journey is, where you might be going next. You may be at the beginning of your career and you might not have very many squares filled in, but please do bear in mind what we've said and how it can shape you. And like it says on the slide, go make your personal impact. Thank you very much for your time today.